My name is Julie Kraft and I have bipolar 2 disorder.
I'm Shaley Hoogendoorn and I live with bipolar 2 disorder.
I was diagnosed 10 years ago at the age of 36.
I was told of my diagnosis and I remember being relieved but also terrified. I know the perceptions and the stigma that goes along with it. I started sharing my story about 4 or 5 years ago.
I decided to come forward and start sharing. It's led to me meeting the most amazing people walking the same path.
So we had talked about collaborating. My greatest hope is that others will hear our stories and feel less alone.
We can offer insight and give the world a real life living example of what bipolar disorder can look like.
This is bipolar.
This is bipolar.
Hi everyone, welcome back to This is Bipolar podcast. I am Shaley Hoogendoorn. I am a mom, a wife, an elementary school teacher, and a fierce advocate for mental health. I also live with bipolar 2 disorder, and I absolutely adore doing this podcast with my co-host,
Julie Kraft, and I'm also a passionate advocate living with bipolar 2 disorder. I'm also a wife and a mom of 3 girls, an author, artist, and I'm just absolutely thrilled at this point in my life to be able to pour myself into advocacy. And most of the time it's recording this podcast. So it is amazing to be here once again. And today we are diving into an amazing topic. The previous episode we recorded, we touched on triggers. And so there are big triggers and little triggers. And so, previously we covered more of the smaller everyday triggers. For me, I had talked about how driving, social situations really brought out my bipolar symptoms. And so today, though, we are going to tackle the bigger life changes, which can not only trigger bipolar episodes or bring out our symptoms, but also can actually trigger bipolar disorder in the first place. And so I know there are people, that go through a trauma or a big life change, and that is actually the catalyst for their bipolar disorder surfacing. And so as always, we are thrilled when we get feedback from our community. So in order to give a few examples of big life changes that we are talking about today, I'm going to go to some of the responses. And so the first example of a big life change that could really bring out bipolar symptoms or bipolar disorder, we have an abusive relationship or a divorce. And so that is, yes, absolutely, definitely a big life change that could be really hard for someone with bipolar. We also have a death of a loved one.
Yeah.
So those are a couple examples. I also have quitting a long-time job unexpectedly. So that's another big life change. And I know Shaley has a few amazing examples as well that she's going to share.
Yeah, there was one that really stuck out with me that I wanted to start with, because sometimes we think they're all negative things. But the interesting, tricky part of bipolar is that it can be big life changes that are also super positive. And this one stuck out to me, and I'm just actually going to read it. It said, surprisingly enough, falling in love was a massive trigger for a depressive episode. And she talked about how it was a big change in a new relationship and living with a boyfriend. So I thought that one was really powerful, because sometimes we always think of the negative things. Another one that people talked about is getting pregnant or having children. We're going to do an entire episode on motherhood and what that looked like for us. So that'll be coming in the future. Someone said the first COVID lockdown triggered hypomania, 100%. We've got changing jobs. Another interesting one that can be the weather. So daylight savings time. We got a few of those. I was surprised about that and tried to think about my own experiences. And then house renovations was one. And someone said living by themselves. Yes. Going off to college. And we hear a lot about bipolar, like you said, starting is generally in the 20s. And that's usually when big life changes are happening, right? Moving out and such. Just let me take one more look. There was one more that I thought was really powerful. Oh yeah. So big social events. So like weddings and funerals and things like that. So we today are going to talk about our experiences with that. And so we have been keeping this on the down low for a very, very long time because we
Very long time.
talk about it. So Julie has a huge life change that she wants to share about. And I am just actually so proud of her about how she walked through this. And we know it was hard, and I don't even know all the feelings or if it triggered certain things. So Julie, we would just love to hear how your life has changed the past 2 years.
Well, I have definitely undergone so many changes, all related to a bigger change. And so our family moved from Canada to the USA, and it was not an easy move. It was not a quick move. It's actually been in the works for about 4 years. And then just the execution of that move. So I'm thrilled to share a little bit more about that. But this is actually our family's 18th move.
Oh my
And
goodness.
yes. And, this was not unexpected. This was very much planned, but I have found it very difficult on so many levels. And only now am I actually able to talk about it and share, for immigration reasons. And so I'm just so thrilled. And so I know over the past, 2 years, Shaley, you have been amazing. You've been very accommodating. There have been so many stressful times where I've just had to duck completely off the radar. There were two very different components, branches of this move. And one was just the physical move.
Yeah.
And so, all the things that come along with actually having to physically move from one country to another. And so the biggest factor in there was probably selling our home.
Yeah.
And for any of our listeners out there, selling a home can be so stressful because of all the unknowns, the housing market, right down to the daily showings. And so I'm not exactly the tidiest person on the planet. So even getting the home ready, number one, to put on the market, but then those showings, Shaley, you're on my mind, those Shaley showings. We had 38 showings from the time we listed our place to the time it sold. And every single time, you would think I would be more organized or more prepared. I wasn't. I felt like I was thrown into a tailspin, and then you just hold your breath every time for any feedback from the realtor. And, one time I was so frazzled that I basically, mopped myself out of our place and ran down to the parkade, hopped in the car, and usually have to be out 45 minutes to an hour. I looked down and I'm wearing my slippers. So that just goes to show the state of mind that I was in. We also had an offer fall through. And, for anyone out there selling a home, every single offer that comes in, you're so hopeful. You think that part of the journey is over. And so we had jumped through so many hoops to the point where I think there was only one more, box to check off before the sale was final. And I just remember walking around Stanley Park with my husband. I was already dreaming, about this part of the move being over and what our next home would look like and, what couch I might want to get. And his phone rang and I knew it was the realtor. And I just heard him say, "Are you telling me the deal is about to fall through?" Now, in that moment, even though I had my health, there were so many other parts of my life that were in order, it felt like my world had come crashing down. The one thing, hurdle, one of the biggest hurdles that I thought we needed to get over had just fallen. So that part of the move was really difficult.
You know what? Can I interject here?
Absolutely. You're going to have to cut me off because I could talk for months.
No worries. No worries. So you don't know this, but we actually had kind of a similar thing happen. I had a townhouse, our first place, and my daughters were 3 and 5, and we were trying to sell it. And the market had literally crashed a bit just before we were going to sell. And so it took 8 months. And I like trying to clean, and it was a 900 square foot place. So trying to clean with the littles,
Yep.
and like I honestly, it would take me like 3 days to recover until the next showing. And it was, I think it came out with, we know this is stressful for a regular person, but with bipolar, it came out in anger. Like I had to really keep myself in check because I was not kind. And especially like
Yeah.
the kids, like, don't touch that. No, no, like they didn't understand, and they were so little. And I think, I think what people think is, oh yeah, it's stressful for anyone, but this
Yeah.
could take us out for days. So when that happened to you, when that fell through, tell me, because I know, we tell everyone we're in our treatment, we are medicated, we are fairly, I don't want to say stable because I don't always feel like that, but what did that look like for you, physically and emotionally the days after that fell through?
Well, Shaley, it happened about 3 days before my daughter's wedding. So
Oh, I
we could go,
forgot.
it just felt like everything at once. So there I was running to the rehearsal dinner, trying to do decor. And that was the one thing that I thought, I could literally put behind us. And so it felt like, everything came crashing down. We went back to square one. We needed to find a new buyer. It meant, in my mind, more showings. It meant our timeline was pushed further behind. And it's really hard sometimes to find steady ground when something like that happens.
Yeah.
I always try to find the silver lining, and there really wasn't one. I mean, now in hindsight, I can see that, if the move had been accelerated, if that deal had gone through, probably wouldn't have found the house we're in now. Easy though in hindsight, not so easy in the moment.
Of
And like you
course.
said, just the cleaning aspect, when you're not a tidy, clean person, I just remember thinking a showing would end, we'd get back into the house, and I wouldn't want to cook. I wouldn't want to get into my bed. I wouldn't want to take a shower because then the glass would need to be Windex. So yes, it's very stressful no matter who you are. But I think everything we feel amplified, and we feel it deeper. And it's just, so I think these changes are hard for anyone, but for us, it's times a million. Shaley, I would love to know
Yeah.
about, any moves that you've had or potential moves, and if those have been hard for you or exciting and hard, because I know oftentimes we talk about the both and,
Yes.
and
Yes.
we can feel
100%.
both things at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so interesting how a lot of our stories overlap. Mine was a little bit different. So if you've heard in our past episodes, when I got first diagnosed, so I went to emergency, and then I went to this outpatient in between stay place. It's called Crest. And it wasn't a psych ward, and I could go in it, and I was trying to switch off medication. Just for some background, if you want to hear about that, go back to our way beginning episodes. But I when I went in there, we lived in that townhouse I was just talking about. And I'm like the kid person. And when you live in a townhouse complex, like it doesn't feel like much privacy, right? Even your backyards are connected, and we had one common grass space, and there was a bunch of us with kids at the same age. So we'd meet there every day. And it was this like beautiful community. However, it was so amazing. Like kids came in and out of my house, and it was a lot. There were some parents that like left their children because they knew that I was good with children. And
Built-in daycare.
yeah, and when I was stable, that was okay. But when this was ramping up, it was overwhelming to me, and I didn't want to be alone, so I was still always there. But I also needed to be alone, but didn't know it. And so it was just go, go, go. But you also feel like you're in a fishbowl, right? Like I feel like privacy, even though you're in your whole house, I just didn't. And I also, I also make up stories in my head when I'm anxious. So I felt, really, really judged. Meanwhile, no one was probably looking. Like I just felt like, you know, if I didn't come out, I would offend people. If you know, to play or whatever, was I getting my kids out enough? There was just all this
That would
build
be
up.
so hard.
So, and then on top of that, I go to the hospital, I go to this place, I get my diagnosis, right? So I'm already feeling these things before, but then they're amplified. So then I got fixated on something because it was real fixated on moving and getting out of there, because I was convinced that staying there was the reason that that all this was happening. I hadn't quite grappled and accepted my bipolar diagnosis, so I needed an explanation. You know how humans, we need an explanation. So it was, we are moving. So when I got out, where I stayed was in this community called New Westminster, and it's one of the first communities in the Lower Mainland that some people came to. Anyways, it's old, is what I'm saying. Old character homes. And what I would do is I would pace and walk that whole time I was there. I was pace and walk through these neighborhoods. So one, I was convinced we needed to move there. And then two, I got in my head right after that I also wanted to move to Bowen Island. So this is a small island that you have to get to a ferry to. In the winter, there's probably not a lot of social stuff. There's not a lot of stores, you know, about shopping. And I got fixated on these two places. And this would have been like, I don't think these would have been good choices. But I also think if my husband was like, didn't entertain it at all, I would have perhaps gotten worse, right? So he even went to Bowen Island and looked at places with me, looked in New West, which would have uprooted us from all our community here, which we've built. And you know, I don't have family here. So our chosen family, like just to move completely away from them to this island or to this other neighborhood, would have been a terrible choice, right? But I was stuck in this. But the good thing was, and I was talking about with my husband, and that it took so long to sell that I settled, right? And realized like we need to stay somewhat close in the area. So it was a beautiful thing because it was a catalyst to the move that we absolutely needed. We were bursting at the seams in this little place, but also it could have been catastrophic if I, you know, jumped on it right away when I was in the beginning of getting sick. So that's my moving story. So let's continue with yours, because you are still trying to sell this house. Everything's got pushed back. You don't even know if this dream of moving to a different country is going to happen. Where are you at?
Yeah. Well, the home finally sold.
Mm-hmm.
We were just so relieved, but that also kicked, you know, part D, E, F, G, and H of our plan into motion. And, you know, I mentioned we've had 18 different moves. Some of them have been, you know, a lot smaller than others. But in 2012, our family moved abroad to Germany, but we didn't sell our home. We kept it back in Canada, and I knew the move was temporary. So I think knowing this move was not tied to a career, and it was going to be more permanent. I think as exciting as that was, it was also terrifying because yes, what if I landed, you know, in our new spot and I didn't like it or didn't settle in? And, you know, we were actually my two adult daughters decided to stay up in Vancouver, Canada.
Right.
So the thought, this was the first move that was going to separate our family. And even though my one daughter was now married and my other one, you know, is going to school up there and she was out living on her own. And so she definitely had the choice to come, you know, and she made the choice to stay up in Canada, even knowing that as a mom, and knowing our third daughter was coming with us and how much she would miss her sisters, you know, that was really, really hard. But we, you know, moved forward with that. And, you know, I just kept saying, we're going to just take this, you know, one step at a time. But I will go into probably the most stressful part of our move was my immigration. And so my husband is an American citizen. My kids are dual. I was the odd man out and, you know, needed to apply for a green card. Everything was left to the timing of COVID. And so what should have taken 6 to 7 months took 2 years.
Oh my
I
goodness.
had the stress of not knowing if my husband would move without me, if my youngest daughter would need to set up life in a new country without me. Um, it was so stressful. It's probably on my top 5, most difficult things that I just had to let it go. And I just kept thinking, is my interview date, which by the way, I needed to fly to Montreal for. It's the only place they will do interviews in Canada.
During
So
COVID, during COVID.
during COVID, um, I just thought, is my interview, which you never want to pass up that date, is that going to fall on my daughter's wedding day? Is that going
Yeah.
to fall, on Christmas, like
Anytime.
around? So I mean, I could just scream the amount of tears that I cried and nights that I laid awake. And I am a woman of faith, and I do trust that there is a plan and it's all going to work out. But I still had my moments of doubting and,
Right.
is this even what we're supposed to be doing? Because
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not happening. Well, I am thrilled to report that last fall, I was able to move down with my family in January of 2021 on a visitor visa. So I was very legal down here, but not permanently down here, knowing that eventually my interview date would come. So it came. I flew up to Canada. I needed to be there for a total of 5 weeks while I got medical exams done. Made my way across Vancouver to Montreal, went to my interview.
So not only you have, clearly all of the things you just listed,
Yeah,
but there's also not just the big fear of not being accepted, for all the various reasons.
yeah.
You also are public with, as a mental health advocate, you have written 2 books.
Yes, I
You're
have.
you're on a podcast called This is Bipolar,
Yeah.
right? We know the stigma around that. We know that there's stigma around that when you try to get insurance. We know that it's still very, very much behind. And so talk to us about that added fear and the thoughts running through your head about that and how that affected you.
Yeah, it was a very real fear. So they are very thorough with the process. And so as part of my application, I did have to give any social media handles, any websites, my job. And so it was all out there. And yes, that was very much a fear of mine. If you've listened to any earlier episodes about, stigma and what actually propelled me to come forward as an advocate, it was an experience with an insurance agent who declined me insurance because of my bipolar, and then made some very harmful comments, about bipolar. So I've got that experience in my mind. And, part of the experience of getting your green card is a medical exam in which I had to divulge my bipolar diagnosis.
Oh my
And
goodness. Oh my
honestly,
goodness.
I didn't think, I was fearful, but I thought, we've come far enough, and I really don't think this will be an issue. But I did have to answer questions, have you ever, been violent? Have you ever, all these questions. So then I thought, oh my goodness, is this really in 2021? Is this going to be an issue? And so when I went for my medical exam, there's always that gulp, even if it's to a doctor when you divulge that you have bipolar. There's those seconds where you're just, did everything they thought about me now shift, knowing that I have this diagnosis? And he did actually say, it's very important that you let them know that you are taking medication and not drugs, and that you are very much in a stable place. And I just wanted to cry, because I thought, on top of everything, now I need to worry about this diagnosis. And as I step up for my interview, am I in the back of my mind going to be thinking, I need to show them that I'm safe, I'm stable, I'm a good person, let me into the country.
That is something that I want neurotypical or people without mental illness to really understand. I think that really illustrates stigma, because there's so much to worry about, even if you don't have a mental illness. But this is the stigma that we have to monitor ourselves
Yeah.
in all types of situations. And you see us out here as advocates and really open, and we're like, tell everyone. And it's, it's going to be okay. And if they don't understand, stand in your truth. But the fact is, this can actually, like, that could have, and here I go with my catastrophic thinking, like, really ruin the plan. The whole plan would be ruined. Like, you can hear my voice right now. And also, we are always thinking like, oh, did that sound too dramatic? Oh, did that? And that's exhausting, right? Exhausting. And I think that you just really, really brought that through what you were talking about. And it just reminded me that policing almost of ourselves, it just sometimes feels so unfair. I think about, oh, well, if my husband said that, or my friend said that, and the person didn't, know that they didn't have mental illness, they're not going to think anything. But it's someone that knows I have a mental illness, almost takes everything I say through a different lens. So anyway, keep going, but I just wanted to.
And the fear is there every time I pick up a prescription.
Yes.
Even though these are pharmacists, they shouldn't be judging me. I feel like I need to put on a business suit and step up, and and when I'm speaking to doctors, and I just 10 minutes before, we started recording, was filling out a medical intake form because I can finally set up with a doctor, and there it went, family history and any medications, and it's all out there. And all I can think of as I press submit is the secretary or the doctor reading it. And, that first time I go in for my appointment, I'm going to, as the doctor, going to really be sitting there trying to assess if I'm stable. And, I'm coming up on 12 years. I think you are too, since our diagnosis. And just for anyone out there feeling those same feelings, we still feel them. And I think they're completely normal. And I mean, my dream is that one day we won't have to feel that way. But for now, I definitely do feel that way. So fast forward, I have now gotten myself to Montreal. I dressed to the nines as a businesswoman because I thought, if any part of this could be affected by having bipolar, I'm going to do everything in my power to step up, in my interview and show myself as a worthy, stable person. And so it was very intimidating, but my number finally got called, and I thought, oh my goodness, I have been waiting 2 years for this. It all rides on this moment, who the agent is. And so he did ask me how I met my husband, how, quickly we got married. And so that was fun to be able to say that, I met him because I was dating his best friend. There must be an episode coming about that. He asked if they're, still friends to this day. And then he just said, well, what do you do? And I thought, here we go. You've got to just own it, girl. So I said, well, gulp. I'm an author and an advocate. And I said, I've actually written 2 books about mental health. And he said, really? Well, tell me about them. And I thought, oh, here we really go. So I said, well, one's a mental health memoir geared for adults, one's geared for children. Spread the conversation, get it started around mental health. And felt like 500 years passed, and he just grabbed his stamp and he said, that's fantastic. I'm issuing your visa. I'll never forget that moment. Yeah. And I couldn't get out of there fast enough to just start texting and tell my lawyer, this is what he asked, because I could hear other interviews behind me, and they were going all different directions, and some of them weren't going so well. And so just complete relief. And yes, I'm going to take it as a small win, or maybe a big win, for advocating absolutely anywhere in the world. But to have
what are the chances, right? Like,
what are the chances?
We hope that happens with all people that experience that. Like, but honestly, I think that I haven't ever heard a story like that. So it's so encouraging, because clearly that person understood.
Yeah. And when I was having my medical, the doctor did say it's going to come down to the border agent that you get, and whether they have an understanding of mental health, or whether they're going to be affected by the stigma that's out there and see bipolar 2 disorder and immediately, cut to those images that are out circulating, of those extreme cases that are not always treated, and so I was just so relieved. And so this was only this past fall, I officially crossed the border, um, as a permanent resident alien, in November. And, I had been away from my husband and daughter for almost 5 weeks at that point. And when I
Wow.
went through the border at Vancouver Airport, they were so lovely, welcomed me to the USA. And I said, "Can I cry now?" And
Oh,
she said, "Yes, you can be emotional." And my husband, I, called him and I said, "I'm through." And he said, "You have permission to just sit somewhere and cry." And I think it was tears of relief, tears of happiness, just the feeling that I, finally feel like I, can settle in down here. And so I don't know if I mentioned, but I'm down in Arizona. So I'm getting used to the scorching temperatures. It does get very hot, but very, very excited, to be down here. But, it wasn't
yeah.
easy, but it was worth it. But yes, I am going to stop talking now and Shayla, give you the opportunity to share any more insights about,
Yeah.
big changes and big moves in your life.
Yeah, before I do that, I want to say, so I got to see Julie when she came here
Yes,
to Vancouver. It was so awesome because a lot of you don't believe us, but we've only actually been together in person
three
twice.
times.
Three times. I forgot about one. Three
Yeah.
times.
And
So
it's been amazing.
yeah, I know. We're like, yes, we're very stereotypical hypomanic when we're together.
Yeah.
But I remember because I walked this journey with Julie, I remember seeing her. We were in White Spot, we were having breakfast together, and I actually could physically see the difference in her. And
Oh,
I don't know if I ever told you this, but you just felt lighter. I could see more hope in your eyes, and it was such a beautiful thing to see. So I absolutely saw, like literally saw physical changes in you, and even how you talked about things. And yeah, that was a lot of years. And uh, I wonder if you didn't have your treatment plan, and we're pro medication. You do you, but we are pro medication. And
yeah.
I'm so grateful you had that, because I'm so curious about what that might have or could have looked like
Yeah.
if.
And I mean, I'll be honest, I just now feel like I'm, coming out of a darker period of my life, and social media, I've been very quiet. And so now, thank goodness there's sunshine here, but I literally feel like you had described, lighter, and this weight has been lifted off my shoulders.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about that as well, just weather changes, and that's a big one for
Yeah.
me as well. I'm curious about. I always think, because I would love to move where there is somewhere sunny. I wonder how that would affect me. But I'll talk about some other
Yeah.
big changes. But thank you for sharing that with us. One of the things that I wanted to talk about really quick is that I think stopped my diagnosis from being recognized sooner, is that a lot of these things we talked about is change, and big changes. It doesn't mean that it always affects us negatively. We think a lot of times it will throw us into a depression, but I think what people less understand is that the mania that the good ones or even the bad ones can throw us into. And um, I thrive with spontaneity, and I am an extrovert to the nth degree, right? So I don't have social anxiety. So I'd see all those symptoms, and I didn't feel like I fit. And so I think it's really important to put that out there for others that don't think they fit in that box, because I don't think it's all encompassing of all experiences. And like I can, a friend could call me and be like, "Hey, you want to go out in an hour?" And I'm free, or to a concert or whatever, that might throw. What I've talked to a lot of people with the bipolar anxiety that would, no way, they'd have to plan, like this would throw them
That
off,
would be
right?
me.
Yeah, right. And you say, like, you look at the menu and all of those things. I don't need to do that. I might be a little nervous about where I need to park, but besides that, I love those kinds of things. And so I see myself as a because I'm mostly spontaneous, and I can be like that. But again, it's a mood disorder. So it depends if I'm what I'm into. It's very hard to get out of the house when I'm depressed, but I still always do because it's harder for me to be with my sad thoughts than it is to be out, even though I'm kind of numb and not enjoying things. So I just wanted to put that out there. So if you're wondering, no, I can't be bipolar because of this, that is not entirely true. So you don't have to relate to all the symptoms. So one of mine in that, you know how we like to see ourselves as things? So you could probably see that I'm like, sound proud of myself that I'm spontaneous and all that things. So it took me a long time to recognize that I'm actually an anxious traveler, and not within the country. So I haven't traveled outside of the country very much. We didn't have a lot of money when I was a kid, and all my parents' family lived in Ontario. We lived in BC. So every family vacation we had, we went to Ontario.
Road
Very
trip.
cool. I've seen most of the country before Ontario, between BC and Ontario. So I haven't been out of the country that often. And in fact, I still can count on my hands. And so when I go to a completely different country, and I'm trying to think, I think my first one was our honeymoon when we went to Jamaica. I, for someone that plans everything, and like I'm the planner of the house, my husband's so easygoing. I tell him usually what we're going to do on weekends. Of course, he has input, but it's just been my thing. It comes to something like that, I freeze. I can't even plan it. I tell him things I'd be disappointed if we didn't do, but he has to. It's like I freeze. We're planning to go to Europe someday. It was supposed to be, but someday soon. And the thought of even planning it, or even we went to Mexico and he had to plan the entire thing. And it took me a long time to admit it because I felt like it took away from this person I thought I was. But I remember just this relief of being like, oh yeah, I'm an anxious traveler. Like I barely, for someone that loves to talk to anybody, I was afraid to order because I didn't want to say the wrong thing. Or my husband tried some Spanish words or tried to be, but I didn't want to look like lame tourists. And I get so self-conscious, which I'm not generally super self-conscious. And so traveling and out of the country is a huge, huge, huge thing for me. And then another big giant change, and this, even when stable, I didn't realize how much it affected me until I was out of it. We had 2 major floods 2 years in a row. And I'm talking like our entire basement ruined, and just destroyed, and everything. We had a basement suite, so all of my stuff we kept in the garage. For example, I didn't have a lot of storage and I have a lot of clothes, so like all my winter stuff was in there. And then summer, like I can't even tell you how much stuff was destroyed.
I'm so
And the
sorry.
first time I came home, and it all happened. And so that's dealing with insurance. That's having people come in and out of my house for renovations. Also, I often felt like they didn't listen to me as well as they did to my husband, even though I was in charge of all the renovations. I had many men come in that didn't listen to me. And so that was triggering. And then to not feel safe in your safe place.
Yeah.
That year in Vancouver, those 2 years that it happened, we had the most rainfall warnings that we've had as long as I've lived here. So I would pace. And the first time they told us this is a 1 in a 100-year thing, right? It's a freak weather. It came down so hard for 20 minutes. Our house was the lowest on the street, yada yada. So I felt like, okay, this is a one-time thing, and we need to get through it, and it drags on and on, right? So then next year, within a week of that same time, happened
No.
again. I'm home. I am watching it pour into my house. I have some sandbags. I have my big hunter boots on. It's coming over. I've called the fire people. I've called, like, can you not? I know that you usually give water. Can you suck it out? Like watching it happen and being able to do nothing about it. We talk about sometimes with bipolar disassociating, and it was like I had to almost leave my body because I didn't even know what was happening. And my husband was out of town, and I just couldn't believe it was happening again. And then knowing I had to go through that again, and that my house wasn't safe, and that it was just going to keep happening. And what if I can't sell? Like, you have to tell people when your house floods, what if and I was just like, I need out. And so those 4 months, because when it's insurance, they go at their own pace. So it would, like, they wouldn't show up for 2 weeks and then show up, and everywhere in Vancouver flooded. So it took forever, and I would pace at the window. Even though I knew I needed the sleep, it was almost impossible. I was in like, I literally thought our life was ruined, because I thought, we could go, what if we can't sell this house and we go into bankruptcy? Or what if I have to do this forever? And yes, I did use coping mechanisms, and I got through it. And so many people said to me, there must be a reason, or, there's going to be something, but that wasn't helpful.
That would have been me.
It's okay. But just so people know, it's actually not helpful, because I did it and I felt like it invalidated. And so then I actually withdrew a bit, and it was just took over my thought life. And I, even to this day, we're in the same neighborhood. We have a better house. We have all those things, but I actually refuse to say that it all worked out in the end, because if you told me that I wouldn't have this, but didn't have to go through that was 2 years of my life. And I can say, yes, absolutely. It worked out, that those catastrophic things didn't happen. But I am not the type of person, and this, that will say that, if you could take it away, I would take it away. And this, because it was 2 years of my life. And so, I just couldn't get out of it. I had a hard time talking about anything else. And then I didn't want to hang out with my friends as much, because I felt like it's all I could talk about, and that I would be a downer. And everybody was like, oh, it must be so fun shopping. And at first it was fun replacing everything, but it was lonely. Not everybody, nobody has that kind of money to go shopping all the time. So I was alone, and you have to do it it took all the joy from it. It was the first time in my life that I was like, I don't want to shop anymore. And then I'm going to use this word because I believe it applies, because it's mental illness, but I was obsessed with replacing everything, because with money, I didn't want them to give me 30% because the clothes were older. I was going to replace. And in fact, they couldn't believe how much I actually replaced, because I refused. I knew our insurance was going to go up, and I refused to be ripped off.
Yep.
And so that was probably one of my biggest ones.
Yeah.
And I want to tell you a bunch more of the coping mechanisms, but we're actually going to do that in the next episode. And same with Julie, because you might be like, well, great, you guys, you told us these things, but now we're like all worried with you. What do we do? And we have a bunch of those that we're going to talk about and share from our community, because we're geniuses. You people are so great.
I know.
And if you can't wait until then, because we know that our podcasts come out, when they come out. We tell people all the time, we would love to be the every second Tuesday kind of people, but we know that having those constraints with our bipolar just doesn't work. We have to put them out when they go out, and we try and do 2 a month. So if you're someone that's on the edge of your seat and wanting strategies, we actually have a whole post, and I'm going to keep repeating that one so that we have a more opportunity to tell each other. But there's one, and you'll see it says change is hard. And a lot of you have given really cool strategies there, and we're going to share those. So thank you for coming along this journey with us. A lot of times we always feel like we need to give the answers, or we're not experts, or perhaps we should read all about what the therapists are saying, but we're here just to tell you our lived experience, and tell you that you're not alone. And also, very selfishly, this is our therapy telling it. And Julie, how do you feel that it's out there?
Relief. And, I'm just so thankful, that you were so interested, and that I've now been able to share a little bit about, this huge part of my life that I have lived through. And, like Shaley said, we are both here. We've come out the other side, whether it's been a flood, a desire to move, to a secluded island or a hop across a border. Thank you so much for tuning in. And this is Bipolar.
This is Bipolar.
Thank you so much for joining us today on this episode. You can find previous as well as future episodes on YouTube for the video version. You can find the podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google Play, and Podbean. And we spend most of our time where you can join our community and interact on Instagram at this.is.bipolar.
It is so helpful if you enjoy our work or think it would be helpful to someone if you could like and share and save and follow us in all or any of those spaces. Another thing that's really, really helpful, if you're a listener for the podcast, if you could leave a review, we would be forever grateful. Again, thank you for being here with us. Let's get the word out. Let's share lived experiences so that we can change the ideas that people have about bipolar and help those of us that live with it feel less alone. See you next time.